Most popular anime are set in fictional worlds, expressions of imagination merely inspired by myth and culture. But Vinland Saga is different, because this story, it's real. In this video, I will step into the pages of this manga, retrace the footsteps of this legendary explorer, and breathe life into this brutal history that defined the Viking Age. And my first stop on this journey is a place you'd least expect, my home, Ireland. Because this is where I discovered that the main character of Vinland Saga, Thorfinn Karlsefni, was a distant relative of mine. This is the moment that inspired me to write this video. You see, my family lineage has a motto. It reads, "The strong will yield to the stronger." Now you see, in Ireland, family names represent famous clans, and mine was no different. But that motto, it always felt kind of strange to me. Ireland's famous for its rebellions against the British, famous Celtic warriors like Brian Boru who never yielded to anything, even in the worst of situations. And yet here's my family, citing subservience, almost like it's a virtue. It just feels wrong. How could a king refuse to fight when someone tries to take their home? What kind of warrior throws down their sword? The fact that this story explicitly explores that very question was enough to lure me in. I found myself researching the story behind it, diving into translations of the original Vinland Sagas themselves. But what I found within these books was a single word that stopped me in my tracks. Thorfinn Karlsefni descended from Kjarval, King of Ireland. Now at first I thought that this name had to have been a mistake. I mean, I had not heard of a more Norse name in my Irish ears before. But the wildest part is that it wasn't a mistake. It was a Norse translation of a genuine Irish king called Kjarval Mac-Dún-Lainne. The very same king that gave rise to this that you see behind me and my family. Over 1,000 years ago, Kjarval's legacy was fractured. One branch followed the Vikings into Iceland through his daughter, eventually producing the legendary Thorfinn Karlsefni, while the other, much later, produced me. But to tell you the truth, sitting here amidst the ruins of my family's former seat of power, I still can't get that motto out of my head. The strong will yield to the stronger. It feels like a celebration of surrender. But if you think about it, Thorfinn's family sort of did the same thing, right? They abandoned their homeland, sailed into the brave unknown, and built something genuinely new. So why does one choice feel like cowardice when the other feels like courage? To understand what it means to be a true warrior, I need to retrace Thorfinn's journey, through history, through Vinland Saga, and through my very own bloodline. As breathtaking as Iceland is, this is not where Vinland Saga begins. At least, not in the manga. Instead, we start here, France. You see, how an author chooses to introduce the main character can actually tell you quite a lot about what they want you to pay attention to. In the anime, Thors is just thrust into the spotlight during the most transformative moment of his entire life, and in the process, we get to see the themes and message of the story. But Yukimura in his manga chose to go about things kind of differently. We might not know it yet, but this is what the story is about. Communicated in just a few quick shots, faceless men throw themselves into the meat grinder on the whims of cowards in the name of honor and glory. We don't see their faces initially, but once we do, we don't see glory. We see fear, hatred, and confusion. A writhing mass stripped of their humanity, offering the perfect transition for Yukimura to introduce the world to his lead character.
So Thorfinn, well, you better get ready.
The very first time we hear Thorfinn's name spoken in the entire story, it's in service of a battle strategy. The very first time we see him, it isn't with any sort of emphasis on his face or who he is, it is what he can offer in combat with a close-up of his blades. Like, these are a series of intentionally rich and creative choices that service one message. That violence is the name and that honor is the goal. And the only thing that matters in this age is violence and what you can bring to it.
I've done enough for you. But still, you want more.
Fine, if you close the deal, I'll give you 3 shiny gold coins.
By withholding just the right amount of information, Yukimura constructs a psychological mystery for us at home to try and figure out, all the while placing Thorfinn into a psychological prison. One where Ascalad maintains complete dominance by dangling the very thing Thorfinn craves just out of reach, begging the question, what is it? We don't know yet, but whatever it is, Ascalad is able to leverage it to make Thorfinn risk his life for his gain time and again. Despite this obvious manipulation, it's difficult not to gravitate towards Ascalad's character. While he might seem aloof and relaxed at first, eventually it becomes clear that he's acting, revealing a weaponized composure concealing a profound strategic mind and battle competence. Thorfinn, by contrast, seems singularly focused to a fault. Charging headfirst into the writhing mass of humanity we saw in the story's opening, something else comes screaming into focus concerning the young Thorfinn.
So not exactly what I was anticipating. I hope it goes without saying that I wasn't anticipating Thorfinn to be a literal psychopath. I mean, I love the action. Don't get me wrong, the story is pretty cool so far. There's hints of there being a deeper purpose and meaning behind it all, but still, I'm sort of waiting for that aha moment where the story surprises me, where it stops being a story about Vikings and violence and all that kind of stuff, and becomes something more, something that can be applied not just to the story and these characters, but something that can be applied to my life, my family, and pretty much anyone that can watch it. The historical authenticity of Vinland Saga is inextricably connected to the story itself, its characters, the Vikings, the choices they make to navigate the world that they're in. It's all part of this calculus that Yukimura interweaves within his story to create this perfect balance and marriage of history, character, story, everything that makes it infectious.
And in order to explain why, I have to come clean about something first. I'm not actually in France. I'm in Ireland. Why? Well, because the Loire Valley doesn't look like Yukimura's version of France at all. But the south of Ireland does.
From waterfalls to annoying thick temperate rainforest like this, to agonizingly steep climbs that made this a far harder shoot than it ever needed to be, these all serve as a beautiful analog to what Yukimura was trying to capture in his manga. But if France doesn't have any of these geographical features, why include them at all? Now, with that said, I should say that because Yukimura is bending geography, that doesn't mean that he's fabricating history or tainting the legacy of the story. Funnily enough, it's actually making it better.
When Askalad's Vikings carry their longships overland through the night over steep, wooded terrain to circumvent the waterfall and gain a tactical advantage, that isn't fantasy. That's precisely what made them so successful.
So while Yukimura may have chosen to alter the geography, the topography, and water systems of this area to a significant degree, that choice enabled him to weave in some genuinely compelling and authentic history that never would have found footing otherwise.
The result is an immediate establishment of these warriors as genuinely competent with a superior level of naval design and strategic thinking. In one stroke, he shows how these wolves of the Atlantic managed to carve out what we now call the Viking Age.
But within this opening gambit for our attention, Yukimura managed to sow some seeds that would eventually blossom into the themes of the story: self-deception during war, and Christianity.
Introduced succinctly through the reprehensible Frankish lord, a lord who drives this massacre in the name of Jesus Christ, embodies Yukimura's central conflict, the gulf between what people say they fight for and what they're really fighting for. Thus, this scene isn't so much about Christianity versus paganism as it is about how humans construct noble narratives to justify base motivations. The Frankish lord's incompetence and cruelty are masked by religious rhetoric, while Askalad's pragmatic pursuit of profit is at least honest about his own nature. To a point at least. When Ascalad describes Thorfinn to his men as expendable, he's stating facts, but it's a measured and overly simplistic response for someone as intelligent and nuanced as Ascalad has now proven himself to be. When Thorfinn handles the guards who accost him and charges headfirst into the chaos for the head of the commander, suddenly it becomes clear what Ascalad was doing all along. He was managing his men's morale as much as he was commanding Thorfinn's ability. This psychological and cerebral element of Askalad's persona, his ability to understand people at a glance, is central to his character.
Hey,
Incoming warships!
Look closely. That's Askalad's ship.
There is an awesome scene, by the way, when they return to Denmark and Askeladd has a conversation with his uncle, who is sort of complaining about the usefulness of his slave. To which Askeladd corrects him while looking directly into Thorfinn and saying, "It's not the slave's fault that she's useless, it's your poor handling of them." The implication here is unmistakable. Thorfinn isn't just another expendable warrior, he's a weapon Askeladd has carefully, meticulously crafted, consciously over time, to do his bidding.
Through this lens, we realize then that these duels Thorfinn gambles his life to earn aren't battles at all, they're maintenance. When Ascalad remarks that every single human being is a slave to something, he's revealing the operational principle that governs his entire approach to leadership and manipulation. He understands what enslaves each person and uses that knowledge ruthlessly. With Thorfinn, that slavery is obvious, his obsession with revenge that makes him predictable and controllable. But as we'll soon discover, this principle applies just as much to Ascalad himself, making him a tragic figure even as he masterfully manipulates others. However, all of these hidden motivations converge when Thorfinn's mask finally slips. Seated atop a docked ship, all alone, we glimpse his past and hear of Vinland for the first time.
And finally, we found a new continent!
While making this video, I have traveled all over the place, and that's meant connecting to Wi-Fi in airports, hotels, cafes, and all kinds of open and unencrypted networks. Unfortunately, those things are a playground for hackers, and all it takes is a bit of knowledge for them to gain access to your emails, passwords, and even your bank details, which isn't exactly something I'm willing to risk, particularly when I, have a whole YouTube channel to be worrying about. Which is why I've been using ExpressVPN. It wraps all of your traffic in an encrypted tunnel, transforming you from an easy target into an almost impenetrable fortress. ExpressVPN uses best-in-class encryption, so there's no exaggeration. It really would take billions of years to crack. Thankfully, it's all seamless too. With servers all around the world, I wasn't having to compromise latency and speed just for a bit of privacy. The great news for any American viewers too is that you now have servers in all 50 states, so you get that exact same experience entirely locally. It's just one click to connect and you're good to go. Surprisingly, it's also cheaper than ever thanks to their new tiered plans. Starting at just $3.49 a month, you're getting a great experience. That's just 12 cents a day. And even the basic plan gives you 10 simultaneous connections. So a laptop, phone, tablet, whatever you use, it's all protected at once. They've been our longtime partners, so you can get yourself 4 months for free with my special link. Scan the QR code on screen, click the link in the description, or go to expressvpn.com/notmark. That's 4 months for free. Go get it. Are we in Iceland? Antarctica? Or heaven?
Cold! Cold. It's pretty cold here. This scene with Leif and his stories of adventure are beautiful because of what they reveal, right? Like earlier, I illustrated how Yukimura bent geography to illustrate historical Viking tactics, but here, he's doing something a little different, right? So he's turning a lack of historical information into an opportunity to explore Viking memory.
While it's unlikely that Leif was a storyteller at any point in Thorfinn's childhood village, this creative choice exposes precisely what makes the original Vinland Sagas the perfect conduit for historical fiction. They're full of gaps, legends, and room for invention, all the while just so happening to overlap with Thorfinn's formative years.
Viewing the story through this historically conscious lens, while Leif's placement as a village storyteller might not be historically accurate, there is some truth to it. Over 1,000 years ago, no one in Iceland kept a written historical record. Instead, these tales of adventure were preserved for hundreds of years through storytellers just like Leif. Precisely what he's doing in this scene.
It is a beautiful scene that blurs history with legend in precisely the same way Thorfinn's tale came to be remembered also.
What do you say, little ones? Think better of me now? Old man Leif Erikson?
This is, of course, all to say that incorporating fact into what is first and foremost a fictionalized retelling of Thorfinn's story is always going to be a difficult task. The unfortunate side effect for me, however, was that I didn't exactly know where in Iceland Thorfinn's village was.
I looked at the source material. This is Eric the Red saga, and it reads, and I quote, "There was a man named Thorfinn Karlsefni, the son of Thord Horsehead, who lived in North Iceland at the place now called Reinines in Skagafjord. Karlsefni was a man of good family and good means. His mother was named Thorin." What?
So there you have it. Thorfinn Karlsefni was a rich kid from a good family in the north of Iceland, not a poor kid from a complicated family in the south. But because I went to Iceland in the dead of winter and the Northern Territory looks like this right about now, I decide...
Fuck it, we're going to Vic.
So yeah, in the end, Vic was the perfect place for me to visit, because on top of having the best black crust pizza I've ever had in my life, let me tell you, while I was walking the shoreline, I could so easily envision how surviving on this island during specifically winter would have been a near impossible task. How people could have lived or died based on their management of livestock when cut off from the rest of the world. Furthermore, this small town looks exactly like Yukimura's take on Thorfinn's childhood home, complete with a nice little shoreline, a docking for ships, a series of gradual snowy slopes leading into a small village surrounded by mountains.
But to cap off Leif's introductory scene, he offers a definition of what constitutes a true warrior for the children as well as us at home to consider. A definition that challenges virtually everything these children have been taught to believe. According to Leif, a true warrior fights against base impulses, comfort, and external forces. Where the children see glory in violence, Leif sees strength in resistance, resilience, to the sea's dangers, to the temptation of easy choices, to anything that would control your actions. This, of course, takes on an air of tragic irony almost immediately, as we know full well where Thorfinn ultimately ends up. But what's interesting about their dismissal of Leif's claims and wisdom is best demonstrated through young Thorfinn's reasoning. He will only believe it when he sees it. To which Leif reminds him that that's not really what believing means. Sometimes you need to take a leap without knowing where you'll land. And so when Thorfinn begins to ask the right questions about why they came to this frozen island in the first place, Leif's reasons cut through Thorfinn's naive view of both his people and his father. They ran. How could they run away? True warriors like his father Thors would never run from conflict like that. They would always meet the challenge head on, no matter the cost. However, when Thorfinn retreats to the comfort of his family home, Yukimura punctuates his arrival with the most perfect visual metaphor that says, sometimes running away is the only correct option. Thorfinn's moral rigidity serves to make Thors' ultimate response to the slave all the more powerful. Despite being the central figure everyone seems to turn to when conflict arises on their shores, Thors' resolution doesn't involve violence. He doesn't hand over the slave or even fight the pursuing owner. Instead, he sacrifices his own and his family's resources during a harsh winter. This is our first real scene with Thors in the manga. Introduced not through the naive eyes of a child, but instead through the hopes of a dying man. It's worth noting at this juncture that Thors' story is handled very differently in the manga compared to the anime. Instead of being front-loaded with his past and point of view early on, Thorfinn is the audience's conduit, arriving on the scene of a dying man, stunned into silence and eventually confusion as he's confronted with the reality of Leif's words. He was right all along. And so, within this framework, viewing Thors through this light serves a powerful function. Instead of being the character we at home are most familiar with, like Thorfinn, we look to him as a strong man worthy of admiration with a mysterious past he leaves unspoken. As we learn more, it comes to light that for all of his moral clarity, and despite everyone's inclination to turn to him in a crisis, Thors is a profoundly mediocre contributor to the village outside of this one dimension. Incapable of forging the most basic of materials, his hands betray a life of killing, not creating. Where others see a mighty warrior, he sees a failure. A man who can't build tools, can't emotionally connect with his family, and ultimately, a soldier who just cannot escape his dark and regretful past.
Thorfinn, can you go and pass on a message to your father for me?
Huh?
A warship has arrived.
This is my favorite scene in the entire Icelandic section. It refracts plot, Norse legend, and real-world history all at once. It is everything that makes Yukimura's writing so effective, I think. Firstly, there's the Vikings, who are a fascinating inclusion in this story, as the degree to which their legends are true is in some dispute. Fittingly, the anime depicts one of their semi-legendary naval battles as the site of Thors' transformation from legendary Viking to disillusioned pacifist in its opening. However, what I adore about their arrival here is that it represents a visceral and direct consequence of an all-too-real historical atrocity that will go on to reshape the political landscape of Northern Europe forever. The St. Brice Day Massacre. On November 13th, 1002, the then King of England, King Ethelred, who would later carry the moniker of the Unready, ordered the systemic killing of Danes living in England.
And while historians debate the massacre's full extent, archaeological evidence from mass burial sites at St. John's College, Oxford and Dorset confirms targeted killings in areas with significant Danish populations. Among the victims, tradition holds, was Gunhilda, the sister of King Sweyn, a king with control of Denmark, significant portions of Norway, and most pressingly in this situation, a growing interest in controlling more of England. Floki's suggestion is historically accurate. Sweyn would use this tragedy as a pretext for an invasion in England, a decision that would bring the Viking Age to its height. Perhaps the only humorous consequence to stem from this entire ordeal is the adoption of the moniker King Ethelred would be forced to carry henceforth. Ethelred the Unready. While this nickname seems to sum up the consequences of his reign succinctly, the term unready doesn't mean what we actually might think it means. It derives from the Old English word meaning badly advised, an ironic compliment to his namesake Ethelred, which means well-advised. All hail King Well-Advised the Ill-Advised. And in hindsight, given his failed revenge plot against the Norse, his incitement of Sweyn's invasion, and his failed alliance with Normandy, which led indirectly to the Norman conquest and final eclipse of the House of Wessex and Anglo-Saxon kingship itself, I think the history books let him off pretty easy.
This war on the horizon is one in which you too will fight.
Floki, however, has come not to reminisce about the past or the consequence of the future, but to offer Thors an ultimatum. Death for his past desertion alongside his fellow villagers, or war. Once again, it's here Yukimura's structural choices feel justified. In the manga, we experience this revelation of Thors' desertion through his son's disillusioned eyes instead of the objective and emotionally detached fashion it's revealed to us during the anime's opening sequences. Through the manga, when Floki levies the term deserter towards Thors, it hits like a train for Thorfinn, whose entire moral framework has been built atop the foundation of his father's unrelenting valor in battle. How could someone who embodied every principle he admired abandon his comrades? Ultimately, Floki leaves Thors with very little choice. He must accept and rejoin the Vikings.
Off to war!
The reaction from the village reveals something disturbing about Viking culture as a whole, I think. What was once alluded to through the naivety of childish play is now revealed to be the ideal each villager holds to be true. While Thors' head hangs under the weight of his understanding and experience in war, everyone else gleefully celebrates the encroaching tide of glory through combat. However, these romantic and overly simplistic platitudes come crashing against the harsh reality of the world when they're asked to carry Thors' longship to the shore. Unlike the professional killers we saw effortlessly carrying Askeladd's vessel across rough terrain in France earlier, these Vikings have no idea what's truly being asked of them. And sadly, Thorfinn isn't immune to that delusion either. He's already changing, trying to meet this new rising violent tide, trying to prove his merit as a soldier by hurting the other village children. Thors recognizes and confronts this potential within his son that he has feared for so long would surface. And in that moment, we receive the philosophical foundation of the entire series. You have no enemies. No one has enemies. There is no one that you should hurt. With that parting advice and unaware of his son's decision to follow him, Thors departs Iceland forever, positioning us for a revelation that the anime's chronological approach consciously forewent. In the manga, we're not asked what kind of man Thors is, but instead how someone raised by such a principled and patient father managed to become the violent sociopath we met in France. The mystery isn't Thors' character, It's how his teachings managed to fail so spectacularly.
This structural choice proves crucial because soon we'll witness Thors' philosophy colliding with an unforgiving Viking world that won't let him escape his past. A world that confronts Thorfinn with insurmountable dissonance, that sometimes the strongest thing a warrior can do is exactly what appears to be the weakest. With that said, Iceland has been exceptionally awesome and cold, but the winds of change are approaching, and along with them comes one of my favorite scenes from the entire series. It's time I pack up my things and follow Thorfinn and Thors to a special rock in the middle of the ocean with my name on it. But before I do, there is one last place I wanted to visit.
This is a statue commemorating the life and achievements of Thorfinn Karlsefni, and it just so happened that on this day I managed to uncover a fragment from my own family's past, a piece of Gaelic poetry from my ancestor Brian McKeela Fodrig lamenting the collapse of his world in the wake of the English invasion. Tug siad onor is úsil, son cruige is chuile, tug siad firéir agus féile, son ehig is ére. They gave up honor and nobility in favor of hardness and narrowness. They gave up truth and hospitality for lies and satire. Despite having traveled across the North Atlantic and icy tundra of Iceland, what I found through looking at this statue was another reminder of what my family lost. And yet, I wonder. History often remembers and celebrates the dramatic discoveries and high-stakes battles of the past, but far less is understood or appreciated of the subtle choices that sculpt the world around us. Perhaps I'll discover more about my family as I explore one of the most understated and yet stunningly powerful landscapes I've ever stumbled across. I am of course talking about our next stop on this adventure, the site of Ascalad versus Thors within the incredible Faroe Islands.
I had to take a 2-hour train to Edinburgh, 1 flight to Amsterdam, a 2nd flight to Copenhagen, a 3rd flight to the Faroe Islands, and a 1-hour drive to get here. And oh my God, was it worth it? Because look, I didn't think places like this even existed. I thought it was just one of those places Yukimura just made up to fit the occasion, but it's real. It's actually real.
There's so much more to this scene than initially meets the eye. I'd even call it one of the most underrated moments in the entire arc.
Now, while it is clearly and explicitly giving us a chance to better understand the underlying motivations of the likes of Floki and the Jom's Vikings, it's what this scene implies that makes it special and key in setting up what's to come.
Most evidently, Askeladd's crew and how it establishes them as a legitimate threat on the world stage. The Jom's Vikings represent everything formidable about Viking warfare and culture. They are the most legendary Viking band of the age. Unlike Askeladd's ragtag group of pillagers and raiders, the Jom's Vikings are a self-governed, elite military unit known across the Nordic world, and yet incredible. When Askeladd's seemingly boorish band manages to get the drop on these legendary warriors, it immediately elevates our opinion of them and speaks to the strategic mind and leadership qualities Ascalad demonstrated in France.
But if we instead stop thinking about this as an isolated incident and start to think about it as a building block, suddenly the greater purpose of this scene reveals itself.
In the anime, we see Thor stand out as something truly special. We're privy to his history, his fighting style, and what makes him incredibly noteworthy. But by this point in the manga, our understanding of Thors is extremely limited. We've heard tales of Thors' legendary combat prowess and that he was once a Jom's Viking, sure, but Ascalad has already outsmarted this legendary force. Therefore, upon Askalad's acceptance of Floki's request to kill Thors, our baseline understanding places Askalad's group as more than capable of taking out one former Jom's Viking warrior. So okay, we've got ourselves some strong narrative anticipation, but there's still one more piece of implicit narrative framing that Yukimura wove in. The method by which Askalad's crew gains their advantage over Floki tells us everything. Their success stems from wordless coordination. When one of Floki's hidden men needs to be eliminated, Bjorn acts without discussion or order. Where Floki may have seen crude mercenaries, this scene reveals Askeladd's manipulative genius and his band's profound competence in harmonious coordination. But it's this very feature of Askeladd's success, this supposed unspoken understanding between him and his men, that eventually proves to be his undoing. For while they can act without words, that action relies upon one fundamental belief. They need to know what Ascalad is thinking. They need to know him. And while they might know the calculated, detached leader he is now, they've never glimpsed the individual lurking beneath that crooked smile. The boy with a dream, looking and waiting his entire life for someone worthy of following.
Hey, Thors. What's it like, fighting in a real battle?
While Askeladd's crew reveals its hidden competence, the man they're hunting reveals what will eventually inform the conclusion of this looming fight, as well as its residual impact moving forward. This scene on the boat and their eventual approach to the Faroe Islands once again reveals what it means to be a true warrior. During the night passage, young Ari witnesses something remarkable. Thors, the legendary warrior everyone turns to in crisis, deferring completely to Leif's navigational expertise. And while this is a wonderfully accurate historical nod to one of history's greatest navigational minds, narratively it's another physical representation of what Leif was trying to explain to the children back in Iceland. Leif doesn't wield a sword, but his ability to read stars, currents, and weather patterns represents warrior virtue in its purest form. The discipline to excel at something vital, regardless of whether it brings glory. Thorfinn does initially miss this lesson as he is sleeping, but as they approach what should be a peaceful village, Leif's trained eye immediately spots the discrepancy. Fewer houses visible on the shoreline than expected. Missing structures that soon reveal themselves to be a trap. The takeaway from this lesson is that true warriors aren't simply limited to fighting external enemies, they fight against complacency, against assumptions, against the comfort of believing things as they appear. Leif's vigilance here exemplifies a warrior's battle against being enslaved to assumptions. However, on this occasion, it was too little, too late.
This is one of the most narratively and philosophically sophisticated battle sequences I've seen over the years. And being in the exact location this event was based on really puts into perspective a few key things. The sheer isolation of this location is haunting, to say the least. I had to drive an hour to get here through what is effectively a country with 40,000 people. This is a remote inlet on a remote group of islands in the most remote part of Europe. The seas are unforgiving, the weather is changeable to say the least, and what it would have taken to actually get her, in a ship no less, during the year 1000, I couldn't even begin to imagine the struggle. And as you can see behind me, the narrow passage into this small inlet bay creates the perfect geographical checkpoint for Ascalad to strategically exploit.
However, what makes it truly special is how Yukimura consciously chose to interweave all of these colliding character choices and motivations, transforming this encounter from great to something exceptional. Right out the gate, our expectations are blown right out the water as we see what Thors is actually capable of. Fighting, effectively with his arms tied behind his back, wielding only his fists, Thors ravages Askeladd's crew while at every turn offering them openings for surrender. However, something unforeseen occurs. Askeladd's men have them surrounded. Why hasn't he ordered them to open fire? I mean, his men, once totally in sync with their leader, now find themselves somewhat confused, questioning this decision. All the while, on the ground, Ascalad looks on, not with concern, but with genuine excitement over what he's witnessing. Then Bjorn eats a mushroom and goes berserk.
While this outlandish and supernatural feat of drug-fueled muscle mania initially seems a standard shonen manga creative liberty, it's actually far more faithful to the original sagas than one might be led to believe. While the Vinland Sagas themselves are viewed today as works with genuine historical merit, they are still stories first and foremost.
Ones that detail instances of divine intervention, prophetic dreams, and yes, even berserker warriors.
And while concrete evidence for hallucinogenic berserker enhancements are heavily suspect and debated, historical accounts such as the Old Norse written corpus and the sagas themselves consistently describe warriors entering trance-like states of frenzied strength.
making this inclusion feel deceptively authentic, honoring the blend of myth and fact that made these stories so infectious over 1,000 years ago. But that is nothing compared to what happens when Ascalad finally steps in.
With their boats floating a few short feet from each other, Thors issues a challenge that would eventually give rise to a fight where every single detail matters. Every choice, every underlying motivation, and most importantly, every sacrifice.
And it all starts when Ascalad announces,
Ascalad, son of Olaf, swears to you in the name of Odin.
Due to the multi-dimensional narrative masterclass this fight offers, let's first explore the combat choreography and how through it Yukimura is able to expose their fundamental differences. Employing his signature high-level misdirection, Ascalad chops down the mass, seemingly as a gambit to create space after Thors' dominant showing. But in reality, it's leverage to create cover for a concealed attack, perfectly matching his leadership style, careful, calculated, designed to mislead, and eventually surprise. He's impressive, even to Thors. Now visibly troubled, this gives rise to Thors concluding, with regret, that he can't afford to hold back against Ascalad as he has against the others. And as his first move in this physical game of chess, Yukimura reveals Thors' reluctant tactical genius. Having observed Ascalad's reliance on misdirection, Thors orchestrates a counter that turns Ascalad's greatest strength against him, allowing him to believe he's gained the advantage when, in reality, this choreography and strategy is a synergistic masterpiece because it reveals a deeper dimension of Thors' philosophy. By targeting their weapons instead of each other, Thors' strategic approach betrays a fundamental belief that swords represent failure. Violence in his worldview is evidence of corruption or a lack of alternatives. Even victory feels like defeat when achieved through means he's learned to despise. However, upon demanding Ascalad's surrender, a third tragic dimension to this battle reveals itself. Ascalad is a slave to his men's view of him. He cannot surrender. The only way Thors leaves this place alive is if Ascalad himself doesn't. The battle's pause allows for the philosophical core of their confrontation to emerge. When Ascalad asks why Thors hid his abilities for 15 years, the response that he receives cuts to the heart of everything. Quote, "The only reason I must rely on this sword is because I am imperfect. A true warrior needs no sword." Thors views his current situation, being forced to fight despite years of peaceful living, proof of his life's greatest failure made manifest, even if he's victorious in this duel technically. Violence to him represents the last resort of those that lack the ability to create better options for themselves and those they love. And through these words, Ascalad hears something that makes his heart stop. He has discovered something truly extraordinary, something only Leif had glimpsed before, a warrior who's transcended the need for warfare. And Ascalad's response is unprecedented.
Do you want to become our leader, Thors?
Confusion abounds. His men, once in lockstep with their leader both physically and mentally, now find themselves unable to make the same connections he has. Something has happened here. Ascalad has changed. As the silence hangs between the two men, both Ascalad and Thors realize, through unspoken connection, that the answer to that question could only be one thing. No. Realizing this, Ascalad immediately retreats back to his aloof nature. The only difference now is that we at home can see through this mask. There is much more to Ascalad than we initially realized. And in a moment that perfectly juxtaposes the spear throw with Floki, Bjorn intervenes on Ascalad's behalf, only this time, it feels profoundly intrusive. Thus, this intervention forces the tragedy that informs the entire story. And it all comes into focus through the invocation of a single name. Artorius.
In the name of Artorius, my ancestor, my men will all be withdrawn.
At the beginning of this duel, Ascalad announces himself as Askeladd, son of Olaf, a seemingly unremarkable name void of any greater context. And in the anime, it's exactly that, unremarkable. However, because the manga began in France, this throwaway moniker, son of Olaf, suddenly takes on a new life.
I, Askeladd, son of Olaf, in the name of my ancestor Artorius, accept this challenge from Thorfinn.
Artorius, otherwise known as Lucius Artorius Castus, represents the historical inspiration for King Arthur, the legendary ruler who was prophesied to return from the mystical Isle of Avalon in his people's darkest hour to restore peace, virtue, and prosperity. And so, by agreeing to the duel initially as simply son of Olaf, without any mention of Artorius, it speaks to the profound reinvigoration he underwent through this chance encounter. In Thors, Ascalad glimpsed what he thought impossible, a living embodiment of Arthurian virtue. For years, possibly even decades, Ascalad had long given up on the possibility that Artorius would ever return. Content in his vapid existence as a Viking pillager, this battle reignites his promise to Thors in Artorius' name, symbolizing the rejuvenation of something deep within his character, a greater purpose, and from that shift, dissonance sprouts between him and his men. These soldiers, only familiar with his disillusioned self, void of such dreams, now through their lack of understanding become the mechanism of his potential undoing. Acting to protect their leader without realizing their actions were in fact destroying his only chance at redemption. They return him to that aimless, self-loathing existence. This is why Askalad's reaction to their intervention feels different from his usual calculated manipulation. For the first time, his carefully maintained facade cracked, now found in a position where his own men have forced him to murder the hope he was waiting for. And left behind in its wake is a promise.
I'm gonna kill you!
Yikes. Right? Well, I guess while Thorfinn's sociopathic leerings gradually evolve into a sardonic fixation courtesy of the passage of time, I should get myself out of these wet clothes into a drier area and back onto a plane because I'm going to England. England! Though technically at this point it's technically not England, it's more like a Danish occupied territory called Danelaw, but we'll get to all that bullshit later.
Through chapters 17 and 18, it becomes clear how much more resonant and meaningful this material proves when positioned within the manga's non-linear framework versus the anime's chronological structure. By the time young Thorfinn swears revenge for his father, the anime has already undermined the moment's intended weight, creating a structural problem I'm not sure it ever really escapes from. In the manga, the scene serves as a return to present-day Thorfinn following the Icelandic childhood interlude. Through this positioning, its purpose is unmistakable, to demonstrate how much more human this ruthless character feels now that we understand the story that created him. We've seen through harrowing sequence how both literally and figuratively the light inside people is stomped out in a world overrun by demons and darkness. Zooming out, the sequence only works because of its reactive nature. By opening in France, we build a specific impression of Thorfinn as a remorseless killer. The childhood flashback suddenly reveals the humanity behind the madman, and chapter 17 concludes by showing Thorfinn as conflicted yet already disillusioned into something close to inhumanity. Running shoulder to shoulder with demons, he's indistinguishable, however much he may deny or resist a deeper connection. But that tension demonstrates just how complicated the foundation of this story truly is. I've already noted how the France material loses power in the anime, but the betrayal segment suffers even more. By placing it before the France arc, the adaptation strips the moment of its retroactive meaning and reduces it to just another beat in Thorfinn's decline, resulting in episode 5 to 8 becoming the weakest stretch in the entirety of the first season.
Now, regardless of those narrative missteps, the anime does occasionally redeem itself with wonderful historical flourishes. The Humber River, as it's presented today, is not exactly breathtaking, but in the anime it's presented as the ancient woodland it once was.
Perfectly positioning a young Thorfinn to encounter what many Brits have never seen in the wild: a wolf.
You see, during King Henry VIII's reign, wolves had been pretty much wiped out throughout all of England. Thus, this sighting near one of their last remaining northern strongholds is both period appropriate, as well as hinting towards the sorts of behaviors that would eventually give rise to the domestication of the dog.
It's such a subtle touch, but an authentic one that I very much appreciated. And on the topic of historical authenticity, one detail stood out as profoundly interesting.
So as the Danes move towards London Bridge circa 1013, Yukimura shows their march from the Humber down to Wessex in a near perfect straight line that upon first viewing you may conclude that this was just shorthand for describing their general direction of movement. But it's not. It was not a mistake.
You have to remember that 1,000 years ago, the infrastructure for the roads we see today wasn't there. Woodland, mountains, rivers, and any other number of obstacles routinely impeded forward progression.
So, what's fascinating about this deceptively straight line in the middle of the English countryside? Well, it's that it wasn't a Viking creation. It was Roman. And it is so damn cool. It's known as the Fosse Way, and this line was cut to split the Roman side of England with the frontier beyond. In later centuries, it became one of the most widely used roads of the interior, but most interestingly, the Fosse Way helped to create the England you know today. Looking at the route over today's modern map, you'll notice an abundance of locations with the suffix Chester or Chester. Derived from the Latin word castra, meaning camp, it's referring to the very settlements that made the road in the first place.
Within the context of the broader arc, this is a minor and easily missed inclusion, but the philosophy behind it shows Yukimura's deep respect for history.
It's authentic, yes, but it's also a subtle reminder that history, it isn't just in the past, it's very much all around us if we just take the time to have a look. Like this, for example. London Bridge. While that might look like the most unimpressive and depressing famous bridge you've ever seen in your entire life, because it likely is, just around the corner there are fragments of an older wooden past that are waiting to transport you back in time. Check it out! The original wood! Isn't that insane?
Now, if you can believe it, the introduction of Thorkell grounds this story even further in historical reality. Similar to the Fosse Way, he is no invention but a real figure whose prowess was so legendary that only Prince Edmund could effectively challenge him.
When repurposing characters with an historical background, it's tempting as an author to lean into those to the point of caricature. And while Thorkell is presented in a larger-than-life fashion, these creative choices stem not from a misappropriative creative compass, but rather a crucial piece of character psychology that lends insight to the coming conflict ahead. Thorkell fights not for conquest, not for profit, but for the joy of testing himself in combat, specifically against worthy opponents, and without those, it's pointless.
Oh, I like you. You keep this old man entertained!
The matchup between Thorkell and Thorfinn feels inevitable. One an impossibly tall, strong brute, the other an agile, strategic fighter. When Floki offers Thorkell compassion, wealth, and safety, he spits in his face. When Thorfinn tries to kill him and manages to slice off 2 of his fingers, suddenly Thorkell falls in love with the boy's potential. But overall, this whole dynamic shared between these two characters reveals everything about Thorkell's priorities. Similarly, King Sweyn's strategic positioning of his son Canute is equally telling. Placing the boy in an unwinnable situation under the guise of forging strength, Canute has no combat experience, and Sweyn blames his Christian upbringing for his softness, setting up the religious and philosophical conflicts to come. Thorfinn's dreams reveal his deteriorating psychological state, fantasizing about a time with his father that never happened, celebrations of Yule that represent everything he has abandoned. These dreams then quickly curdle into nightmares as guilt takes hold of him. He knows what he's doing is wrong, he knows he should be with his family, yet this path of revenge has quickly become all he has. Upon awakening, his moral degradation reaches its nadir when he finds his band taking advantage of a young woman. In response to this obviously evil and heinous scene, Thorfinn does nothing except show contempt before absolving himself of responsibility, walking away. The parallel between this morally dark decision and his constant refusal to return is clear. He has the power to protect others and do what is right, yet chooses inaction. Retreating to a nearby hilltop to distance himself from his companions, Thorfinn discovers Ascalad, already deep in thought, perhaps for hours prior to his arrival.
This is chapter 20, and it finally explores the philosophical and emotional connection between Ascalad, Thorfinn, and indeed the twilight of the Viking era as a whole. And while it's just a hillside conversation on the outskirts of Bath, it may also very well be the best chapter of the entire arc in my estimation.
Ignoring Thorfinn's taunts and attempts to distance himself, Askeladd's responses reveal something of deeper concern. Thorfinn will grow up, and Ascalad will grow old. Time favors the young. Even the strongest man must die.
As Ascalad gestures to the Roman ruins that surrounds them both, his point crystallizes. The Viking era, the era that they've all lived within, that they can't envision presently living without, it's going to fall eventually like all the others.
And from an historical standpoint, Ascalad isn't incorrect here. By this point, the peak of the Viking Age had well and truly passed.
And the wildest part, in just a few short decades, and Ascalad would have had no idea about this, but good foresight nevertheless, the Viking era was about to come to an abrupt and bloodied end.
As the sun rises, Ascalad delivers a line that speaks to the existential reckoning he's currently facing.
Look out there, Thorfinn. Almost ironic, isn't it? A new dawn is breaking in the age of twilight.
So as you can see, or rather not see behind me, Yukimura saw fit to bend history here too, by placing these ruins atop this hillside in Bath to act as the physical embodiment of the very conversation Ascalad is trying to have with Thorfinn now. To glimpse the kind of ruins you would have seen in that scene, you can go to any number of locations around England, most notably scenes like St. Albans. It's got the Roman pillars and everything. But why did Yukimura choose Bath of all places to host this crucial scene? Bath was indeed a Roman settlement, a significant one at that. However, it wasn't the main settlement by any stretch of the imagination. That distinction went to Londinium, otherwise known as London, due to its lucrative situation geographically speaking. However, due to the context of this story, London is otherwise serving as the stage upon which Prince Canute is attempting an offensive against none other than Thorkell. So yes, Bath it is. It is windy as all hell, but to this day, Bath boasts possibly the most well-preserved Roman ruins in the entire country. And while they may look nothing like that which Ascalad and Thorfinn are sitting upon in this scene, they offer a glimpse into the lavish, culturally rich, technologically advanced civilization Ascalad is trying to invoke memory of right here.
However, more than anything else, on the narrative and historical fronts, Bath's position, geographically speaking, is what reframes this entire conversation. And at this point, Ascalad and his band are the only Danish warriors still in southern England, deep in enemy territory, creating a circumstance whereby his loyal followers are forced to question why.
Holding a now worthless Roman coin from the most powerful empire in history, Ascalad recognizes the parallel to his own life. He is waiting for something, for someone, before Ragnarok's weight crushes him. Will he fade into the past like just another Viking pillager? Or will he use his talents to seize what little time he has left?
We glimpse this internal desire for exceptionalism during his clash with Thors, of course. For the first time in his life, Ascalad encountered someone truly unique, someone capable of challenging the world for the better. He sincerely offered Thors leadership without any conditions. He simply wanted to be led by someone worthy. In the years past, he has slowly grown fond of and respectful towards Thorfinn. Perhaps he sees within him a similar potential for greatness, perhaps a reminder of Thors, or perhaps he's simply the only person nearby that he can connect with. Whatever the specific catalyst might be, something fundamental changes within Ascalad on this hillside. Following this scene, just like he did momentarily during his battle with Thors, Ascalad's interests become diametrically opposed to that of his men, leading to uncharacteristic risk-taking and eventually desperation. His own men comment on this shift, but his response proves telling yet again. He's getting old, and he can't wait for the true king of Avalon to return. Essentially, he's admitting the world he had been waiting for hadn't materialized, and so has resolved to create that necessary change himself. The echoes of tragic irony deafening upon each and every page turn. While warning Thorfinn about futility and dwindling time, Ascalad has decided he can't let his story end without meaning. He's trapped by the very narrative he wants Thorfinn to escape from, that purpose matters above all, even if it destroys him.
In light of all of that, this hillside conversation isn't about Rome's fall really, but instead about a man realizing he's running out of time to justify his entire existence.
Hey, Prince! Between Jesus and the gods of Asgard, who do you think is the most powerful?
Now, something I've intentionally refrained from exploring up until this point is a theme integral to this entire story, and that is religious dissonance.
Within the context of its history, the sagas, and even the manga itself, Thorkell is a fascinating and hilariously fun character. But do not let his light-hearted nature fool you, because he becomes the vehicle through which Yukimura explores the competing survival strategies of Norse paganism and Christianity.
Now, I'm not particularly religious, but I do find religion fascinating, specifically in how Yukimura weaves it into the narrative. When Thorkell and his ilk mock the Christian god, their derision stems from a worldview where deities must embody qualities essential for survival. And so, to them, Christ wasn't a savior, he was everything Vikings were taught to despise. Now, at Thorkell's core lies something deeper than lighthearted battle lust, of course. He embodies Norse virtue, driven by a desperate search for the noblest battlefield where he might earn Valhalla. Every choice he makes stems from that conquest, spiritual fulfillment through glorious combat. Comparing Thorkell's religious views alongside the priest reveals a broader pattern emerging. Religions are survival strategies, strategies where gods are created to meet the needs of the societies that worship them.
Ultimately, the Norse worshipped deities that celebrated what their culture needed. Odin the warbringer, Thor the destroyer, Loki the cunning trickster. These gods didn't judge moral character, they rewarded them for their effectiveness in combat. Conversely, Christianity's emphasis on mercy, forgiveness, and turning the other cheek in such times as these, it would have been suicidal. Religious systems emerge as a byproduct of successful survival mechanisms within a society, and if successful, continue to morph as those societal needs change over time. I mean, trade-dependent civilizations developed tolerant pantheons of gods accommodating diverse beliefs essential for commerce. That's not a coincidence. Societies facing unprecedented disasters worship chaotic gods with rituals providing psychological calmness and, some sort of catharsis within such uncertain and turbulent times. Heck, early Judaism emphasizes earthly justice, but as inequality grew and tyrants escaped earthly punishments, concepts of heaven and hell gained prominence amongst their following.
And so this is where Christianity itself finds footing within the world of Yukimura's Vinland Saga with striking authenticity. Thorfinn's nightmares show the weight of guilt and regret, and surely some of his pagan peers feel the same way. Here, Christ offers what Norse gods cannot: forgiveness. No matter how much blood had been spilled, repentance can always wash it clean, an irresistible prospect to warriors questioning the cost of their own violent actions. Thus, the religious clash in Vinland Saga operates on multiple levels. Literally, Christianity's spread represents the twilight of the Norse world and way of life, and thematically it mirrors internal transformations as characters grapple with what strength actually means in an ever-changing world. Even when Thorkell finally encounters Thorfinn, he refers to Thors as a true warrior, with his reasoning revealing something important. Thors was the only man stronger than himself. In light of this, the label true warrior takes on a different connotation. Like religion, it's amorphous, revealing more about the speaker than it does the subject. Thorkell considered Thors a true warrior because he possessed attributes Thorkell aspired to have and valued per his desire to reach Valhalla.
I just want you to take this letter. And tell them it's from Ascalad, the son of Lydia.
Son of Lydia. A declaration that immediately invokes recognition and respect. A Welsh lineage previously hinted at through the invocation of the name Artorius finally finds itself in center stage. But unlike my ancestral cousin, it is here our paths must finally diverge, and not because Yukimura changed something in the geography, it's actually because of progress. In years past, crossings of the River Severn were common. It is an enormous estuary after all, but it is also low tide right now, which I am not sure Yukimura took into consideration. Needless to say, when it is full tide, its unforgiving currents and turbulent weather at the best of times makes it easy to see why even the likes of Thorkell were halted by its obstacle. These days, there aren't any nautical crossings available, at least not in the same portion of the river. Thankfully though, I have an equally impressive way to cross into Wales.
The introduction of Wales itself feels deliberately mysterious and almost otherworldly. Boats emerge from the fog in eerie silence. After the Norse, Danes, Franks, Icelanders, and Greenlanders, we now encounter the Celtic contingency of Britannia. And with them come echoes of Rome through titles like Legatus.
Going off of Yukimura's map, it seems that Ascalad and his band were brought to a village that eventually became modern-day Newport in South Wales. However, you don't need to go far before you can eventually hear those same Roman echoes today. You know, speaking as an Irishman, I have to say that I was a little disappointed when Ireland wasn't really featured prominently in any capacity in this story. But I have to say that I'm absolutely thrilled that the Celtic world is represented by the Welsh in this story. There are people often pushed aside in favour of bloodier stories like Sweyn's Conquest, but in this arc, they prove just as pivotal as the Danes or the English, royalty or otherwise, and it's all because of Ascalad.
When it comes to historical relevance, Ascalad is an interesting case. While not based on a real person in the traditional sense, he is an amalgamation of several key components from this time period serving as their collective voice. Loosely based on the backstory of Olaf the Peacock, an Icelandic chieftain and major figure in the Vinland Saga, Yukimura shaped Askalad's personality around the Norwegian folk character Askeladd, known for his cleverness. But perhaps the most compelling element of Askalad's character is in his ancestry.
With a Welsh mother and a Viking father, he embodies an important but often overlooked element of that European and Viking history. The ordinary person's struggle with identity and duty during violent times. Meaning it was never as simple as Danes versus English or Celts versus invaders. As is often the case in history, it was messy.
This struggle reminds me of Brian Boru, someone I mentioned earlier not just as a legendary Viking Age figure, but as a historical mirror for the amalgamation Ascalad himself represents. Boru is credited as the first true High King of the entire island of Ireland. He defeated and unified the petty kingdoms of the age under one banner to take back control from foreign invaders. But notice I didn't say he wanted to take control back from the Vikings, because by that time, Vikings and native Irish fought both alongside and against one another. Many Vikings had been born in Ireland, integrated into its culture. The conflict itself wasn't simply Irish versus Vikings, it was a new way of life versus an older one. This is what makes Ascalad my favourite character from this first arc. He's a measured and compelling combination of Icelandic, Norwegian, Danish, and Celtic traditions, traumas, and histories, all neatly packaged into one energetic, flawed character actively driving the plot forward and bringing their respective stories into focus. He also exposes stark contrast between the Welsh kingdoms and their English pursuers, showing how Yukimura uses historical fact to shape the narrative's tension. The Welsh aren't seafaring raiders who can project power across vast oceans like the English or Danish can. Therefore, Ascalad and his followers, while they may have gotten help this time to cross the river, they can't rely on their ships for the rest of this treacherous journey. Instead, the arc's fundamental tension is established on foot. Can Ascalad and his band survive? And how can a people focused on survival and defense possibly resist systemic conquest by a professional army?
Such a strange man. I don't think I know anything about him. He doesn't tell me a damn thing. He keeps his distance.
Amidst one of the most treacherous periods of their band's long history, on a journey they're all growing increasingly unsure of, Bjorn, Askalad's number 2, makes a confession that points to the first major wedge between Ascalad and his men, that they have no idea who he is or what he's becoming. Stunned at his ability to speak fluent Welsh all of a sudden, to their would-be attackers no less, it's becoming clear that he never saw these men as anything more than a means to an end. Tools in service of a larger plan they couldn't comprehend. Slowly, day by day, setback after setback, they're starting to realize this for themselves. Through Askeladd's conversation, his backstory is revealed, and with it our understanding of his plan crystallizes. Become the Welsh mole within the Danish ranks to secure their future. It's a good plan, one that it seems only he is equipped to carry out. The only issue? It hinges on Prince Canute's ability to transform from a frightened boy into a worthy leader. And we need look no further than our first impression of Canute to reveal the mountain Ascalad is currently facing. Where Thorfinn embodies the harsh pragmatism only battlefields and trauma could forge, Canute represents a sheltered naivety. While Thorfinn remains grounded in brutal reality, Canute literally drifts off in prayer, staring at birds and God's creation. Gentle as a kitten, fearful as a fawn, and utterly incapable of speaking for himself, let alone leading a group like this. He's exactly what these Vikings think of when they hear the word Christian. When Welsh commander Gratianus attempts diplomatic engagement, Canute retreats into his familiar paralyzed silence, leaving Ascalad to reflect critically. If this prince cannot find his voice, cannot project even the most minimal amount of authority, then this entire elaborate plan collapses. How can someone who hides from simple conversation hope to inherit his father's throne and command respect from hardened warriors? No prayer, no matter how virtuous or faithful, can impede the inevitable winds of change. Either Canute adapts, or this entire plan will fail.
Complaining about the weather to me isn't gonna solve anything. Weather on land is outside my expertise. It would have been impossible to predict it was going to snow this hard at the start of winter.
Something that I haven't said nearly enough since going on this journey is, like, I've been in a car. The idea that these lads walked all of these miles across this ridiculous, look at this terrain. I mean, it's pretty and all, but Jesus Christ, there's so much shit to cover. For the first time, it's brought to our attention that Ascalad has been second-guessing himself, altering their course through England to avoid Thorkell's pursuit. They encounter a massive blizzard traveling through the countryside towards the safety of Daneslaw, and it's here that Ragnar insists that they turn back after noticing the state of Askalad's men. These guys are rattled. But what makes the scene interesting is how Ascalad responds, noting how bothersome Ragnar's Christian compassion is during times of hardship like this. The themes, therefore, of Viking versus English, Christian versus pagan, they run just as prevalent throughout this story, but they shine brightest in this next sequence.
Around a dinner table just moments before they're raided by Askalad's band, English Christians discuss a looming event in their teachings. Judgment Day. The day where Jesus rises, bringing the righteous to heaven while damning the rest. Now, as I noted earlier, this prophecy has been reinterpreted for centuries to explain why he hasn't returned yet. And the date that they cite does seem arbitrary, but it isn't entirely. While it's not the day of reckoning, it is a critical turning point in English history. The death of Canute. Right now he seems helpless, but for historians the mention of this date and its framing within prophecy foreshadows the monster he will become in the eyes of the English. Bolstering this exchange, a similarly religious but equally powerful chain of events paints an uncomfortable picture. As Ascalad and his men ransack this struggling village, a young girl is seen running off to confess her sin of stealing. The priest's warnings are silenced by Viking frustrations in the blinding snowfall. The lengthy silence followed by harrowing screams are deafening. It's a scene which captures pretty much everything beautiful and tragic about Christian idealism coming into direct conflict with Viking pragmatism.
Now then, get ready, men! Kill them.
In the end, Askalad's decision proves to be as logical as it is disgusting. Kill every last person in that village to prevent the word from escaping and putting themselves in danger. But it's that awkwardness, that cold callousness, the ease with which Ascalad makes that decision, which ultimately exposes the growing rift between Viking pragmatism and the Christians they have in tow.
Out of everyone in the village, one survives. The girl whose guilt over petty theft left her to seek absolution at the perfect moment. Tragically, her initial perspective convinces her these Vikings, these demons of earth, are what remains following her community's rapture. But as any Christian would say, God works in mysterious ways. Through her survival, a reckoning is beckoned from parts unknown. Ascalad and his followers have walked, crawled, and marched through the valley in the shadow of death. But over the next horizon line awaits a foe Ascalad and every single Viking present should fear deeply. The wrath of Thorkell the Tall, still in pursuit of Canute to ensure his glorious battles may still continue.
Father, give me a sign. Tell me my voice is indeed reaching you. I do not see your love. And so I begin to doubt it.
That's enough!
The questioning of faith in times of instability lies at the heart of this first arc. The priest, once unwavering in devotion, now turns to alcohol just to endure. This frontier of war and bloodshed is no place for him, yet these horrors afford Canute his first moment of genuine resolve. He declares, and I quote, "There is no father who cannot love his own son," the subtext of which reveals his troubling relationship with his own father, King Sweyn. In light of this, his retreat to God in the face of past conflicts takes on a brand new shape. A longing, not for comfort, but instead a father that won't abandon or test him as cruelly as his earthly patriarch has, time and time again. Whether this devotion is salvation, dependency, or both, it must eventually be reckoned with in this hellscape. Chapter 31 strips away pretense. It exposes Yukimura's philosophical framework through a scene so sharp it embodies his narrative genius, historical rigor, and moral philosophy all in one fell swoop. Once Ragnar's body is returned to Canute and Thorfinn is assigned as his guard, Bjorn confronts Askeladd privately to question the efficacy of continuing this increasingly desperate plan. Askeladd's response cuts to the heart of his character. "Why have you stuck with me all these years?" Bjorn followed Ascalad for precisely the same reasons Ascalad wanted to follow Thors: recognition of something exceptional worthy of devotion. Connecting directly back to Ascalad's earlier observation that everyone is a slave to something, thus the line between following a great leader and worshipping a false idol becomes vanishingly thin amidst circumstances this dire. We're reminded time and again that Ascalad's story hinges on Canute's unlikely ability to become someone worthy of following, a fact that places our attention squarely on how Canute will react to what lies on the horizon, particularly after his reaffirmation of faith in the face of genuine doubt. But religious dissonance isn't unique to Christians here. The claim that everyone is a slave to something could just as easily be rephrased as everyone worships something. And in this chapter, we finally explore how the themes of doubt emerge when confronted by the wall of resolve that is Ascalad. After failing to heed the advice of sound judgment time and again, after ignoring every single Christian plea to spare the innocent, Ascalad now finds himself torturing an Englishman, in a scene that exposes the rationale behind his dangerous decision-making for what it truly is: ignorance.
You know, despite having come into this with a decent level of understanding of the period, I have to say that watching an English captive curse out the brutal Danish nation for stealing their food, killing their innocent, and destroying their home, I experienced something quite profound as an Irishman. I mean, I get to witness an actual depiction of violence and brutality committed against the English while they in turn condemn the foreign terror. Their outrage is entirely justified. But the profundity of this scene comes through its hidden messaging, that no victim stands above reproach. Power itself is what determines who gets to inflict suffering and who must endure it. These days, Ireland gets to enjoy a great deal of social currency as the small nation that bounced back against a tyrannical ruler. But when we stop to think about it and appreciate the entire history of both of these nations and their people, is Ireland kinder than Britain? Are mice kinder than lions? Or is it just that one is more powerful than the other, and therefore their impact is recognized the world over?
You animals will be punished. The death you bastards deserve is on its way.
Finally, a new dimension emerges when Ascalad counters with a history lesson of his own. He tells the Englishman that his Anglo-Saxon ancestors ravaged the original Celtic peoples of this island. ancestors of the Welsh Ascalad, now champions. It frames this Danish-Anglo-Saxon conflict as a natural and justified consequence of their past violent transgressions. But what I love about this is how accurately it depicts how each side of a given conflict can rationalize and vilify the other, all the while absolving themselves of any wrongdoing through ignorance, willful or otherwise. But Yukimura's greatest stroke of genius within this interrogation doesn't take shape through what is explicitly or implicitly shared, but rather through what isn't. It's a creative choice that itself exposes the very ignorance he's criticizing within his own reader base. When Ascalad outlines what the Celtic people have lost at the hands of the English, he frames this information within a particularly damning anecdote. Quote, "Yes, the Romans ruled this island, but they lived together with the Celts and shared their knowledge, technology, and culture." If taken at face value, it paints the Anglo-Saxons as savages by comparison. But in confronting the Englishman's blind spots, Ascalad exposes his own. Today, we think of the Celts as the natives of northwest European islands, but 2,000 years ago, Celtic tribes stretched across most of mainland Europe. The word itself comes from the Greek word keltoi, describing people along the Rhine and Danube rivers, basically north of Greece. And unfortunately, what happened to them was Rome. During Caesar's Gallic Wars alone, as many as 1 million were killed and another 1 million enslaved in the process. Even if Caesar inflated those numbers, which is entirely possible, the conquest was undeniably brutal. By the time Rome reached Britain, Celtic homelands across the continent had already been destroyed. And while there was certainly some cooperation, cultural mixing, and exchanging of ideas amongst the Celts and the Romans of England, there were many vicious battles fought also, with strong resistance being met by the likes of the Scottish Celts and Irish. And let me be clear, the Celts aren't exempt from wrongdoing either. In the Iron Age, the Irish, who were then called the Scotti by the Romans, raided and colonized Britain in places like Cornwall, Wales, and Scotland, while wiping out large numbers of the native Picts population, displacing them and settling there themselves. And that's where Scotland got its name from. It literally means land of the Irish. And it's why Scots Gaelic and Irish Gaelic, or Gaeilge, sound so similar to each other. Because, once upon a time, they were the exact same language. So all this talk of the Celts, I'm willing to wager that Ascalad has no love lost for the Irish if he's a student of history depicting the Welsh in a sympathetic light. Ultimately, the lesson to take away from all of this is that a lack of key information and historical insight in this case is the perfect fuel for a radical mind to run away with. Human beings are complicated, beautiful, and horrifically awful creatures under the correct circumstances. But as human beings, I believe it is our responsibility to equip ourselves with our shameful histories, not to burden ourselves with guilt that doesn't belong to us, but to instead bridge the gap in understanding between you and your fellow man. We are all human, and to understand our own history's failings is to guard yourself against our greatest enemies of all, the universal human tendency towards self-deception and selective romanticization in the name of justifying the moral authority of you and your people.
How many are there?
Not sure, but a lot. Coming from the south. They're here. Thorkell is on his way.
The reaction such news yields does more for Thorkell's character than 1,000 tossed boats ever could have. Having bear witness to Askalad's continuous faltering decision-making, his men's doubt has peaked, and Thorkell's impending arrival is the perfect giant Viking man to break that proverbial camel's back. This alone would be enough for narrative tension, but Yukimura never stops at enough. He treats this story as authentic history where everyone has their own breaking points, Ascalad included. Known for his keen eye and judgment of character, he formulates a plan in light of his men's now visible doubt in him. Defectors who choose to abandon the cause are left without punishment. The last thing he needs, after all, is to stir up more conflict among his brotherhood turned snake pit. Yet Ascalad remains unshaken in his resolve, even as everything is crumbling around him.
But it is right here, just as we are starting to believe that Ascalad has well and truly lost his edge, that he reveals his hand.
Thorfinn! Hold up tight, you little runts! We're moving out!
A second smaller detail that often goes underappreciated is that this is actually the second time Ascalad has crossed this body of water. Looking at Yukimura's map, this has to place Askalad's crossing of this river somewhere outside of Telford in England. This, my friends, is the River Severn, and the very first time he crossed this with his men, he was their savior. The second time, their executioner. And through what could only be described as his last high-stakes final gambit, Ascalad reveals what he has loved about Thorfinn and Bjorn all along. It was never their combat ability or their strength, it was their straightforward, predictable naivety.
An observation that proves prescient once Thorkell finally arrives. Now confronted by what he was anticipating, Ascalad declares his hatred for these treacherous men, cutting them down with cold precision one after another. While gruesome, this is a rare and quite awesome scene. It's one of the rare moments Ascalad actually gets to go all out, revealing just who he truly is. Here, the parallels and distinctions between Avalon, Valhalla, and Vinland start to crystallize. When we witness Ascalad's lone stand against 50 men, his fighting prowess proves incredible even while exhausted. Upon realizing his outburst, Ascalad quickly regains composure and begins negotiating, leaving us at home to ask, was this intentional? A calculated display of overwhelming force to weaken their resolve before diplomatic appeals? Or, perhaps, was this our first authentic glimpse at the real Ascalad coming face to face with the consequences of his own actions? Never to leave a narrative opportunity to go to waste, Yukimura continues to leverage the conflicting motivations surrounding this chance occurrence through the character of Thorfinn. For the first time, we see what Ascalad represents for him, and the answer is as haunting as it is simple. Everything. Thus, his choice to abandon his orders, injecting even more chaos into this already chaotic circumstance, feels both exciting and well within the parameters of his character. This, along with Bjorn's final stand consuming the berserker mushroom, creates the perfect convergence of stakes, drama, and motivation, serving to facilitate what is, without a doubt, the single most compelling and consequential sequence within this story. The birth of a king.
They're all the same. Equally ignorant. They don't understand the meaning of life and death. They don't even know why they fight. That which was lost in exchange for knowledge, and that's something we'll never attain for as long as we live, forever out of reach. And despite that, even then you tell us to seek it, Father in heaven!
I've intentionally avoided exploring Canute in an historical context for fear of spoiling the fun chronological approach I've established already. And yeah, okay, it feels strange to think about history as something that could be spoiled, but given that the conclusion to this entire story of Vinland Saga was something you could have just Googled years before it was completed, more than validates my sheepishness in exploring Canute's real-life historical analog.
Almighty, I no longer seek your salvation. If you refuse to give it to us, we will make our own. A paradise on this earth, shaped by our own hands.
Circumstances have changed, not through dramatic speeches or battlefield glory, but instead the psychological landscape of an unconscious mind struggling to make sense of a world that's let him down time and time again.
So up until this point, Canute had been a pathetic, useless, albeit unfortunate consequence of what fate might befall a child who fails to live up to the tyrannical expectations of a king, rendering him little more than the quivering mask we see before us, and that, my friends, makes Yukimura's adaptation of Canute. But what I've actually enjoyed the most about Yukimura's initial meek interpretation of the Danish prince is that he's both leveraging a lack of early information on Canute's life to this story's benefit, all the while informing his characterization with the traits of other key historical figures we don't have much time to interact with in this story. Chiefly among them, the king responsible for Sweyn's escalation in the first place, King Ethelred the Unready. Now, by all accounts, he was a pathetically cowardly and fittingly labeled unready leader. With his father having just suddenly passed away while he was just a baby, he grew up with a host of expectations and no one to mold him into a kingly entity. The result was a man unfit and unwilling to lead in any serious capacity, notably unenthusiastic in battle and exceptionally unwilling to lead troops into combat. All of these qualities informed much of Canute's early characterization, as you can see. Despite this dull or innocuous image I've painted of this shabby king, the lesson to take from Ethelred with regards to the mild-mannered Prince Canute is that under specific circumstances and challenges, even the most mild-mannered and pathetic among us can still stain the pages of history a blood-drenched red. It just so happens that in Yukimura's tale, the blood that would eventually be spilled on behalf of Canute would be on purpose.
Lying unconscious, experiencing what appears to be a final conversation with Ragnar, flourishes of Yukimura's genius become apparent yet again through his narrative restraint. In a world with berserker warriors, prophetic dreams, and men who can throw boats at waves of enemies, this scene is hauntingly still and personal. Void of the supernatural and divine, much to Canute's chagrin, instead, what he's met with is a subconscious manifestation of what he already knows to be true, a creative choice dripping with subtext. Notice how Ragnar doesn't reveal the true nature of his death, but instead acts as a mirror for Canute's complicated feelings. He articulates both appreciation for the love he received and recognition of how that treatment, more like a son than a king, left him unprepared for leadership. Thus, what we're witnessing is implicitly not a supernatural vision from beyond the grave between Christians, but an all too real war being waged between two sides of Canute's psyche. Once he eventually returns to his feet, he's carrying something more. Greeted by the struggle raging all around him, his hands now coated in blood for the very first time, the weight of 62 innocent lives lost on his shoulders, and the priest's nihilistic philosophical musings echoing in the background, what cuts through the noise is...
So, death itself is the essence of love?
The beautiful tranquility of the void that awaits everyone. All other forms of love are mere discrimination. Having finished off the last attackers, Bjorn, in his battle-crazed state, embodies exactly the sort of sinful, bloodthirsty beast the priest had described earlier. Not entirely unlike a demon made real, there could not have been a better conduit for what was about to unfold.
I've already spoken at length about the malleability of faith as it exists within the never-ending soap opera that is the historical record. Religion is created to serve people, not the other way around. Without Christianity, Canute's character would have surely lost his mind entirely amidst the ranks of his family, vying for supremacy, right? For Canute, Christianity was a useful oasis that made life bearable. However, as has been hinted at throughout this story with increasing frequency, a faith, no matter how strong, if it does not offer someone a sense of security or comfort or utility, it is sure to meet one of two outcomes: death or rejection.
In Canute's mind, he is walking amidst demons in a world doomed to cascade deeper and deeper into hell itself without the right person to make the necessary adjustments. No longer believing himself any less flawed than the demons standing before him, Canute stands unafraid, scorns the Lord above for damning mankind to spend their lives seeking what was stripped from them forever, and takes matters into his own hands. No longer a servant to the Lord, he stands before Bjorn, a king. It's here the similarities between him and Ascalad come crashing into focus. If God isn't going to deliver his followers to the promised land or eliminate those demons from the earth, then Canute will create his own paradise where mankind can find salvation. With one touch, he brings Bjorn back to his senses, and the priest drops his ale in utter astonishment. The bloodshed has ended. The savior they've been waiting for has finally arrived in their darkest hour. The king of Avalon has emerged. All Thorfinn has to do now is make sure he's able to keep Ascalad alive long enough for—
Shut up! I don't need your pity! Ah!
While Ascalad splints Thorfinn's broken arm, Thorkell recalls his connection to Thors and the story of his desertion. The irony is brutal. He has no idea Ascalad is the man who killed him. Through Thorkell's eyes, Thors becomes more mythical, the kind of warrior who might guide him to fulfill his goal of becoming a true warrior. He looks to the sky, to Valhalla, convinced that if someone like Thors could meet an honorable end, so could he. But he admits, quote, his soul had gone far away. I still don't understand it. I can't reach him. Wherever it is, it's not here. Searching for answers, he asks Thorfinn what Thors was like after leaving the Vikings. Thorfinn refuses to engage. That's when Thorkell makes his devastating observation. The boy lacks the spark his father's eyes carried. Sitting at home, we know exactly what he means. We've watched it vanish. First in the village he betrayed, and again in the duels that hollowed him out. The child is gone, replaced by a dead stare. Enraged by this, Thorfinn nearly rushes in blindly, but Ascalad restrains him and outlines a plan. He asserts the rules of engagement. Thorkell is bound by honor. If Thorfinn wins, they get to keep their lives. It's a gamble on Viking psychology as much as it is on skill or strength. Thorfinn's intentional blunder provokes the giant before Ascalad blinds him at a crucial moment. And when he does, Thorfinn lands the one blow that can drop him. A strike to the jaw that fells the monster. But Thorfinn can't help himself. He can't stop. He tries to finish it with his bare hands until Thorkell's men intervene. They don't understand their leader any better than most. He's furious at being dishonored this way.
You should know. I've no value as a hostage, Thorkell. I assure you, my father hasn't an ounce of love for me.
Amidst the chaos, Canute speaks calm, regal, unshaken. It's almost jarring, but the effect is unbelievably captivating. Yukimura's once timid prince suddenly aligns with his historical counterpart. Thorfinn is declared the victor. Thorkell channels his rage on his own men, and Canute's calm presence brings an end to the chaos in a way no blade ever could. It cements what Yukimura has built into his character across these many chapters, the belief that true authority doesn't come from weaponry, but from condemning the moment itself. And now there's something new in his eyes, a look Ascalad can't ignore even as Thorfinn begs him to flee. He can't believe his eyes. The pressure that should have broken Canute in two has instead forged him into something truly unrecognizable, a ruler worth following. Thorkell, beaten and despairing, looks up and finally recognizes the figure before him. Canute offers him what he has always craved: purpose. But it isn't the promise of battle that sways him, it's the eyes. The same kind of eyes as Thor's. He missed his chance to follow Thor's once. He's not going to pass that opportunity up again. For Ascalad, the gamble has well and truly paid off beyond his wildest dreams. He confesses to Ragnar's murder immediately and lays down his life for the new king. Together, they march to claim the throne in Gainsborough. Canute's triumphant arrival in Gainsborough is intentionally presented as a complicated mixture of emotions and rising tension. The Forsaken son returning to claim his birthright, the skilled warrior in search of purpose, and the reluctant Welsh savior all serve to paint an unlikely yet inevitable stable of allies marching towards arguably the most powerful king of the age. Notably, as is the case in practically every Vinland scene, humanity finds a way to shine through the oppression of darkness. With all that stands before us, Yukimura inserts a notable downbeat for reflection. A wounded brother confronting the possibility that he may never see another day to the man he pledged his sword, his body, and his life to. There's a beauty to this scene amidst its tragic undertones. It's a man lost to violence, doomed to fall on his own sword eventually, lifted from ruin in the name of peace by a man thought to have been little more than a child. The Christian metaphor at play is clear, but what makes this scene exceptional in my mind is what it offers beyond that in terms of philosophical commentary.
This confrontation between old and new definitions of strength encapsulates everything the exploration of the term true warrior has been building towards in this story. Bjorn represents the classical Viking understanding that strength through violence, worth measured in battlefield prowess, spiritual fulfillment achieved through glorious death is the goal. He embodies the warrior ideal that Thorkell desperately seeks and that young Thorfinn once admired. But Canute's emergence has rendered the new king's power all but obsolete. Through restraint, transformation, and the ability to change hearts rather than stop them. When Canute touched the berserker and brought Bjorn back from the brink, he demonstrated that true strength lies not in succumbing to rage itself, but instead mastering it, both in oneself and in others.
Bjorn was an exceptional Viking warrior, a true wolf of the Atlantic, and for better or worse, a demon of the battlefield. Without him and the decisions he made to execute upon Askalad's plan, it's very possible that none of them would have survived, Canute included. But by being saved, by being forced to return to his senses, Bjorn is forced to lose the Valhalla he fought for and in turn embodies what he and this world would reject: weakness. With Canute having taken the reins of a new age, it's clear that this upcoming wave of change has no room for demons like him.
All right. See you tomorrow, then.
For any Viking warrior, this is a tough pill to swallow. He is confronting his own looming sense of mortality, but by doing so, he's also admitting uncertainty in whether or not someone like Ascalad, especially after all that has come to light regarding him, would even find utility in his companionship moving forward. Where once his berserker fury made him invaluable, now it marks him as a relic of a dying age. Therefore, his question about seeing tomorrow isn't simply about physical survival, it's about whether his entire understanding of strength and purpose has any place in this future. These very questions, implicit or not, demonstrate that his encounter with Canute transformed him, leaving him capable of seeking connection in ways the old Bjorn never really could. Is there room for people like him in this new world? Was there ever room for someone like him in Askeladd's heart? While his one-time leader doesn't confront the subtext of what Bjorn is saying, Ascalad does gesture to his weakened leg, insisting that such a wound wouldn't stop him from fighting. With that, Bjorn's resolve intensifies. That's all he needed. Some indication from the brother he loves that he, the only man who didn't turn on him, may still have value. Not in this world, but in the mind of the only man who ever mattered to him.
Glad to see you've returned. Welcome back, Canute.
While the site of this conversation has not been preserved, the location very much has. Now, Gainsborough's Old Hall, this site plays host to both Canute and King Sweyn himself.
Upon entering this room, the tension is unbearable. What has been announced as a celebration of the prince's return is unmistakably hostile. One wrong move and all three of them are dead. It's a battlefield and our attention is immediately pulled to the experienced warriors of the group, Ascalad and Thorfinn. While Canute faces forward towards his father, Ascalad and Thorfinn intelligently take stock of their blind spots in case of an ambush. Yukimura knows our focus is here, on these two warriors. He knows what we're feeling, and with us very much in the palm of his hand, he offers this line from Canute, reflecting the same ethos of a true warrior. No matter what, you must not draw your swords. In this sort of fight, he who draws first loses. An order, a line of dialogue, and a philosophical insight. To Ascalad and Thorfinn, it feels deeply unnatural, yet it echoes with a haunting truth they once lost. A true warrior does not need a sword. By placing his faith in Canute and not drawing his sword, Ascalad's talents are freed up to focus on why he accompanied Canute in the first place. Finally, the keen-eyed Ascalad can set his eyes upon the mighty Sweyn Forkbeard, King of England.
Those are tired eyes. So, this is the King of the Danes.
I honestly struggle to think of specific instances in this story where Askalad's demeanor has been so visibly shaken. Through fleeting and shadowed glimpses of the famous King Sweyn, Yukimura has intentionally drawn readers in to anticipate the unveiling of this famed historical figure's facade. Narratively, though, it's clear what we've been building up to. However, something I've intentionally avoided while reviewing the story have been the many historical breadcrumbs Yukimura has left for fans of history. Now, as someone familiar with early English history, the more Yukimura refined vague years into specific months, the clearer it became. These dates were a ticking clock, not a background detail. I've said this countless times at this point, but the real strength of Yukimura's Vinland Saga is in its ability to draw from the actual original sagas, but specifically the gaps in the historical record and interweaving his own historical fiction to service the narrative to its advantage, yes, but also breathe new life into the spirit that it's drawing from. However, amidst this ocean of uncertainty, one date, one concrete date looms larger than any other.
The 3rd of February, 1014. The day Sweyn Forkbeard, the King of England, died. For a writer with the narrative and historical acumen of Makoto Yukimura, there could have been no greater character from history to play with. Among the most prominent and influential figures of the Viking Age, with a specific date upon which he was said to have died, with one element missing from that historical record, the means of his death. And so, armed with the knowledge of when this bomb was set to go off with no idea as to the how, Yukimura managed to achieve a level of suspense and drama the likes of which is rarely achieved in storytelling, period. On the surface, this scene asks whether Canute has what it takes. But beneath that, the real suspense comes from history itself. We know he succeeds. But the question is how. For the crown atop Sweyn's weary head to fall, will it require the drawing of a sword?
Canute alone may rise. Take 10 steps forward.
Just as this flawless crown rests uneasily on Sweyn's withered head, his false show of candor as a father hides a deadly test, a challenge to his son. When Sweyn confesses to exiling his own father to claim power, the brutal cycle of royalty is laid bare in a haunting line that echoes throughout history. The crown has a will of its own, and with it, the power of a god.
Your Highness, are you saying the crown ordered you to kill your own son?
There are just 2 commands it gives that the king must follow. To use his power and to expand its influence. And the crown says that you are not to be its next wearer.
Both of you, do not draw your swords under any circumstances. The first to brandish iron loses.
According to Canute's command, rooted in this philosophy, the instant Sweyn ordered his men to draw upon their weapons marked the moment he lost. And while unnatural for the likes of Ascalad and Thorfinn to uphold, the advantages of such an approach prove their worth almost immediately. By drawing your blade, you've announced that words have failed. But with his sword sheathed, Ascalad is free to employ his greatest weapon available, his mind. And with it, he offers the perfect argument. Canute has delivered Thorkell to Sweyn, and with him, London's riches await conquest. A victory worthy of celebration, and most importantly, widely known by Sweyn's subjects. With one line, Ascalad demonstrates a fearless understanding of politics in an age where sophistication and subtlety are a rarity. The exchange between Ascalad and Sweyn is brimming with character-driven subtext. Sweyn is keen to explore the mind of Ascalad for weaknesses, all the while Ascalad needs to navigate any potential misstep that might emerge. For Ascalad, finally witnessing this ugly and decrepit old man who was responsible for the violence inflicted upon countless lives aligns perfectly with his demonic view of the Danes themselves, a fact that during this conversation he must not reveal. However, upon Sweyn's examination of Ascalad, he unveils himself every bit the shrewd and formidable leader Ascalad and Canute feared he very well might be. Inquiring about his name, to which Ascalad claims his father gave him no name. Sweyn recognizes this as a potential weak spot.
Perhaps a child born of a slave.
Having only caught a fleeting glimpse of the real Ascalad during the mutiny in Mercia, the expression on Thorfinn's face here tells you everything you need to know. He doesn't recognize Ascalad as anything other than the slick-talking, smooth criminal we all do at home. But in this scene, he was holding that anger back by a hair. Following Ascalad's earlier play for unity, Sweyn modified his strategy and isolated Ascalad's weak spot without hesitation. From this intellectual display alone, possessing the insight to read others and strike first, it is clear that Sweyn is very much fit to rule and immensely dangerous. Thankfully, Ascalad heeded Canute's advice. The prince was aware his father wanted to appear like a wise king and therefore had no real reason to kill him. Thus, staying in his grasp was the safest option. It seems Canute has also proven shrewd in his own right, correctly identifying his father as a slave to the crown, yet still confident that he can wield its power with skill.
A bracelet?
It's gold. Take it. It's all right. This is yours. You can never have too much gold out on the road.
Through Atli's attempted apology following the mutiny, a facet of Askalad's character reveals itself that I genuinely didn't believe existed. Remorse.
The gold he offers comes with a single condition: never pick up a sword again. And with one glance, Ascalad recognizes what battle has done to this man. The tremor in his hands, the haunted look that speaks of a mind fractured by violence. Alti isn't fit for warfare anymore, and Ascalad possesses enough mercy to spare him further destruction. When rereading this tale, this solitary shot struck me harder than almost every speech he has given. Ascalad has reached precisely where he wanted to be.
Positioned to influence the future of Wales through Canute's ascension. But at what cost?
Every single man who believed in him, every footstep that followed his vision, paid the price with their lives. The gold he offers to Alti suddenly represents something more than sympathy for a pathetic follower. It's penance, a voluntary act of protection to ensure that no other men need to die because of his actions. The irony here cuts deeper when considered against his earlier confession about Thors. Ascalad recognized in that legendary warrior someone worthy of following rather than leading. Now, having successfully maneuvered his chosen king into position, he faces the hollow realization that leadership built on deception and manipulation ultimately leads to absolute loneliness. A fact he's more than willing to accept in the name of his mission, but one that still hangs heavy nevertheless. Having narrowly escaped the tumultuous audience with the now King of England, all eyes, particularly Askalad's, are transfixed on the horizon: York.
Narratively, philosophically, historically, we know that this arc ends over that horizon in York, and yet, despite that, a voice beckons Ascalad from behind. Despite the fact that the site of this final reckoning between two long companions has been reduced to a golf course, it is my belief that this challenge issued from Bjorn is the single most beautiful convergence of change that Yukimura has been trying to communicate so far.
Having embodied the wrath of a demon and faced certain death countless times in the past, Bjorn stands before Ascalad with one final request. After all his years of service, he calls upon the man he gave everything to deliver him to the gates of Valhalla. But at the heart of this traditionally Viking request resides a question that strikes far deeper than simple valor and honor ever could. He claims to have hated him, his followers, and Bjorn suspects Ascalad even hated himself. Stripping away this facade, Bjorn asks, did it ever get lonely? And in a moment of profound vulnerability, Bjorn confesses that he wishes he could have been a friend to him.
In 20 years or so, the day of the final judgment will be upon us. On that day, God will annihilate all of humanity. And the world as we know it will be completely destroyed.
Ascalad, I wanted to be your friend.
Almost ironic, isn't it? A new dawn is breaking in the age of twilight. Yes, Bjorn. You were the only one I've ever had.
This is as close to love as someone like Ascalad, I think, is capable. A violent, brutal, and yet beautiful cocktail of emotions begging to escape from under the oppression of tradition and culture in Viking society. Still, Ascalad always manages to find a loophole, intentionally missing his vital point to necessitate a second closer strike to end it all. Ascalad utters a sentence that portrays the manipulative, calculating, and ice-cold facade he's presented all these years to Bjorn. He says, "You are Bjorn, my one and only friend."
Once again, Ascalad leaves us in awe of the world's absurdity, how the sun can rise on the twilight of man, leaving behind two lone wolves to confront each other.
Bjorn's death is intimate, but what follows, I think, expands that feeling from one of personal grief to a broader lesson entirely. This demand of a duel demonstrates the futility of everything Ascalad has tried to implicitly impart onto Thorfinn throughout this story, with the fight itself proving anticlimactic by design. Having sung the praises of Thorfinn for many a chapter already, Thorkell surprisingly placed his bets on Ascalad to emerge the victor, citing differing styles making fights unpredictable and interesting, and so perhaps this was just a poor matchup for Thorfinn. To Ascalad's frustration, Thorfinn keeps making the same mistake. He's irritatingly predictable, and to a strategist like Ascalad, that's like fighting an opponent with no limbs. It flies in the face of this very worldview. The mistake Ascalad is referring to runs much deeper than just poor technique. It's Thorfinn's misplaced determination, his inability to grow beyond his one singular obsession.
His bad arm's not to blame. Thorfinn lost because he fought like an idiot.
While serving as a tragic piece of foreshadowing for Askeladd's own future, he's suggesting to Thorfinn that by surrendering to base desires you become predictable, easy to manipulate. He knows of this base desire intimately, for the first kill he ever executed was his own father. A vile, ugly human being lacking in grace and beauty. The very same ugliness he sees in Thorfinn right now.
And so, for reasons left to infer, Ascalad offers Thorfinn one final lesson that perhaps will stick. How to kill someone you truly hate. And to understand that, we have to go back to Askeladd's childhood.
Born as the nameless bastard of a Viking lord and abducted Welsh royalty in Jutland, when his mother fell ill and lost the lord's favor, both were cast into the stables. There she filled the boy's mind with stories of Artorius, tales of a savior's second coming that would free both her and him from sickness and slavery, tales that happen to mirror the Christian prophecies closely. As he continues to explain, the parallels begin to pile up. Avalon, described as an unreachable paradise across the vast and unexplored Western Sea, resembles both heaven and Vinland. However, as time presses on and no savior arrives, madness eventually takes hold of his mother, and in a moment of misplaced belief that Askeladd's awful father was in fact Artorius himself, finally arriving to their rescue, a sword was drawn from the Lord to cut her down where she stood. In that moment, young Ascalad realized that if Artorius wouldn't come now, he never would. Therefore, someone had to act. Not a hero, not a god, just someone. It was here that Ascalad chose to become Artorius. Call it fate or dumb luck, but in defending her in this moment, his talent revealed itself instantly. He was like his father, a facet about himself that he despised. Perhaps this explains his preference for strategy over brute force in the first place. It acted as a barrier between himself and the man he despised most. Still, though, he trained under him, gained his trust, and after years of patience, struck him down, framing his half-brother and escaping consequences with his mother in tow.
Ascalad, why me? Would it not make more sense if you were the king who changed the world?
This is why, when Canute presses him, Ascalad rejects the idea of kingship. Bjorn was right. He sees himself as little more than an ugly Viking, monstrous and irredeemable. And yet, by sharing his past, by demonstrating how revenge brought no peace or joy to his life, only decades of aimless disillusionment and pillaging, Ascalad offers Thorfinn his final and clearest lesson of all. Succeeding in vengeance transforms you into everything you hate. An ugly, violent monster that would sooner gamble away every last thing worthy of love in his life, all in the service of a disgusting, base impulse. But the tragedy of this story isn't really found in the contents of the tale or in the merit of its message, it's in the deafness of the ears upon which it fell. The man who spent his life manipulating others for a greater cause finally attempts genuine guidance, only to discover that his methods have rendered him incapable of reaching the one person he most wants to save. Sadly, all Thorfinn sees is another missed opportunity to kill the man who took his father, who took everything from him, blind to the fact that Ascalad himself was the only one trying to stop him from destroying himself.
It's you. You're the son of Thors. Thorfinn.
Through fate or determination, this staged violence brings two figures into view with each other who haven't met in over a decade. Leif witnesses the aftermath firsthand and, more devastatingly, sees exactly what Thorfinn has become once he executes the hired killer without hesitation. It's heartbreaking enough as it is, but Yukimura takes it a step further with the revelation of Thorfinn's surname. Used for the very first time in this series, the surname Karlsefni is unveiled. In Norse culture, sons typically adopted surnames from their father's or grandfather's names, a tradition Ireland followed until the 11th or 12th centuries, in fact. Names like O'Connor translate to descendant of Cocomvar, whilst Fitzpatrick, or the Irish version Macgilla Fodrig, means son of the devotee of St. Patrick. For Thorfinn's historical surname to be explained as a moniker gained from his victory over Thorkell proves brilliant. Karlsefni translates to the promising, a tragic irony given what he's become.
Thank goodness! You're alive!
The emotional impact of this reunion stems from what Yukimura chooses not to show. Rather than following Leif's determined search over the last number of years, we witness in real time his discovery of the depths Thorfinn has reached. There's an air of profound sorrow, Leif witnessing Thorfinn in this degraded state, Thorfinn seeing a living embodiment of how much time he's wasted pursuing his horrific goal. Leif offers news of Thorfinn's family, trying desperately to reach the boy he remembers, but Thorfinn instead erupts. He hasn't done enough. Despite wars, storms, clothes turned to rags, and physical degradation, his grip around that blade has only tightened with time. Or perhaps the blade's grip itself on Thorfinn has strengthened. When Leif vows to remain in town until Thorfinn changes his mind, the young warrior flees. This creates two pseudo-mentors offering identical wisdom in different ways. Stop being a fool, see with clear eyes whilst you still can, don't let ugly hatred consume your life when beauty awaits you all around. Both of these offers fall on deaf ears. The Viking Age bred warriors who feared shame above all else. Those who shrank from violence or failed to answer insult with vengeance were deemed cowards. This represents the mindset trapping Thorfinn presently. Symbolically, the exact culture Ascalad described amongst Roman ruins. Ragnarok has arrived in the form of Canute, bringing the end to this way of life and thinking. The Vikings' days are numbered, and this antiquated thinking destines Thorfinn for one and only one place: the ground. This failed salvation sets the stage for what follows. A man who could orchestrate every political move with surgical precision, yet could not save the one person who mattered most to him. Throughout this story, Makoto Yukimura has maintained a compelling and at times profound standard of narrative tension, weaving together the motives of historical figures to lead us here. February 3rd, 1014. Upon arriving in York, Ascalad has proven himself one step ahead at every single turn. Political chess moves from which carefully curated rumors echo and reverberate throughout Sweyn's ranks. In every sense of the word, Ascalad is the spider with everyone else trapped in his intricate web. All in the name of facilitating a false sense of security and the perfect scene to conclude what has been a truly timeless story. And fittingly, he's dressed for the occasion.
I'll give you the choice to save Wales or Canute. I have an idea as to why you're so insistent about that place. It seems the only thing produced there are filthy slaves like her.
Having been revealed by both Bjorn and himself as a self-loathing pillager filled with regret, isolated by his own selfish decisions on this crusade to make something of himself, for Ascalad to both assume the namesake of Artorias while simultaneously decapitating King Sweyn in cold blood is an act that reveals something hauntingly human, both about himself and all of us at home.
Through King Sweyn's ultimatum of Canute or Wales, Ascalad is forced to recognize that even as he attempts to justify his bloodied past with a righteous Welsh destiny, he has neglected to face his one glaring blind spot: that everyone, without exception, is a slave to something.
What's fascinating is that Ascalad isn't a slave to Canute despite pledging his sword, nor is he a slave to even Sweyn, who issued this ultimatum in the first place. Yukimura's thunderously effective and thematically radical choice here reveals that Ascalad is and has always been a slave to the only person who could ever have deceived him: himself. Throughout this story, if we pay attention to the persona Ascalad projects, there have always been two distinct entities dwelling within him. Whether it be his youthful revenge plot or his self-presentation as a strategic, graceful, and thoughtful fighter against Thors, what's hidden beneath these scenes was a man at war with himself. One side Artorias, the other a Viking soldier. Both in his mind mutually exclusive, a living embodiment of the very conflict tearing England apart during this time period. Yet despite this war being waged within, there have been fleeting but evident glimpses, flashes of the man Ascalad has been trying to suppress. A terrifyingly strong Viking begging to come out, but he would rather struggle for the rest of his life than consciously indulge in or accept that quality that he associates with his father. For his entire life, Ascalad has shackled himself with these chains, choosing one or the other, but never both. Fighting for his life in a world of demons, always with one hand tied behind his back. Until now.
I am Lucius Artorius Castus,
As the heir of Artorias, I'm the rightful king and ruler of all Britannia.
This final surge of righteous and violent defiance in the face of this age's greatest tyrant is the stage upon which Ascalad finally shakes off the shackles that have burdened him his entire life. No longer denying one side for survival or the other out of shame, Ascalad slices Sweyn's head right off of his shoulders before launching into the single greatest massacre we have ever seen in this story to date.
However, while it is easy for readers like myself to get lost in these moments of intensely violent savagery, it's important not to forget that this is but one half of the man Ascalad is choosing to embrace right now. No longer fighting with a handicap and through accepting who he truly is, Ascalad was able to find an answer that both saved his countrymen and the men he pledged his life to through this violent means. The answer and subsequent final gambit Ascalad employs is brilliant and hinges on Sweyn's one weakness. Captured in a line cut from the anime, confronted with Ascalad's blade, Sweyn thinks to himself, "I was careless. I walked right into his clutches." As confirmed by Ascalad himself, King Sweyn is a highly intelligent and dangerous enemy. Truly a man fit to be king, and yet he managed somehow to make the simple mistake of getting too close. Why? Because a man who was capable of killing his own father and who plotted his own son's death could never fathom another's willingness to sacrifice everything that they have for their people. That blind spot became his undoing. Through embracing the monster he despised, Ascalad became the hero Wales needed. And most tragic of all, they will likely never know.
A key and unavoidable feature of this battle is the repetition of Ascalad's words. With every swing of his blade, the words about himself, who he is, where he came from, echo throughout the hall. It's powerful.
Kneel before me! I shall give you the distinct honor of kissing my boot, and then I will end you!
On the surface, this distances Canute from his crime, but beneath, these cries ring out as a desperate plea for legacy. By repeating his name, what he is, and who he's fighting for, he's hoping that perhaps someone out there will remember him and the story he desperately wishes not to end.
Ascalad! Stay back, Thorfinn!
2 words. After offering chance after chance for Thorfinn to transcend his singular obsession, after watching his teachings fall on deaf ears, Askalad's last act becomes one final desperate attempt at protection. With his final words proving prophetic as life drains from his lips, time has run out for Ascalad, but Thorfinn still possesses the opportunity to become a true warrior.
Sons of Denmark, listen to me! From now on, by my birthright, all standing armies and England belong to me.
Finally, the moment Ascalad was waiting for has come. At last, the king has arrived to slay the vicious beast, but not without a receipt for his efforts from Thorfinn. As is often the case in visual fiction like this, symbolism offers an author the chance to explore or express ideas without having to explicitly communicate them to us. In this instance, the allure and subsequent physical toll of the crown has been a specific focus for Yukimura since Sweyn's unveiling back in Gainsborough.
Since its introduction, Canute has been presented and, well, often described as delicate and effeminate, with the very body double Ascalad employed to take the assassination attempt being a woman herself. The message then is clear. Canute has delicate features that Yukimura serves to emphasize his innocence and purity. Conversely, King Sweyn is depicted as a decaying, grotesque husk of a man. That message, too, becomes clear. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. And by striking down Ascalad and assuming that burden, Canute's physical corruption has already begun.
Much as Ascalad served as a cautionary tale for Thorfinn, Sweyn too represents the same warning for Canute, a future glimpse of what awaits those who let power consume them entirely. Amid the chaos, Yukimura demonstrates meticulous attention to historical accuracy. Canute must appear outraged by Askalad's regicide, but his orders include covering the king's body from public view. This small detail matters profoundly. No historical consensus exists for how King Sweyn died, and through this scene, Yukimura honors that ambiguity whilst crafting his own definitive answer to one of history's greatest mysteries. Interestingly, while Yukimura's portrayal suggests Canute tactfully seized power through political maneuvering following Askeladd's dramatic intervention, the historical reality proves considerably messier. The actual consequences of Sweyn's sudden death in February 1014 took a different shape entirely to that which we see in the manga. With Sweyn now dead, a power vacuum emerged, and with it the opening for the Anglo-Saxons to bring Ethelred the Unready, the English king who lost to Sweyn, back from his strategic exile in France. All the while, Canute's response to this setback in history reveals the brutal pragmatism that Yukimura's incarnation has yet to develop. Holding numerous English nobles hostage his father had captured during the invasion, Canute chose to return them, but only after ordering their hands, ears, and noses be severed from their bodies. A far cry from the swordless warrior Yukimura has crafted for us to see today. The fact, however, that Ethelred isn't mentioned in the entire arc outside of a brief nod during Floki's arrival to Iceland, while it isn't something I'm overly concerned with, it is a missed opportunity for some, let's say, humor. As kings go, Ethelred was hilariously ill-suited for the role. While he technically does return to the throne in England in 1014, just 2 short years later he dies, and immediately Canute swoops in to marry his widow, consolidating his claim to the English throne in the process, and in the process proving that even in death, Ethelred couldn't avoid losing.
Tell me, how do you intend to live? From this day on, how do you intend to live your life, Thorfinn? Don't get stuck in a worthless place like this forever. Go far, far away.
If you go far to the west, across the ocean, you'll find a wonderful place where the sun shines bright, far from the wars of man. We'll go there someday.
You, the son of Thors, will go there. That will be your true fight. You have what it takes to be a true warrior.
In the wake of savagery and bloodshed, political leveraging, and chaotic murmurings, the two most unlikely characters in this story to connect face a unique circumstance. Sworn enemies forced to confront the reality that these will be the final moments they will ever share together. For Ascalad, he has achieved everything he has set out to accomplish. Wales is saved through Canute's ascension. The Danish threat has been neutralized, and in his final moments he managed to give his life meaning. Yet all he can muster to Thorfinn is an open invitation to enact his revenge, and through doing so, exposing the very truth of the message Thorfinn had ignored all these years. Askeladd's methods, however justified by their outcomes, rendered him incapable of genuine connection. He could orchestrate the fall of empires, but failed to recognize that manipulation and mentorship were never the same thing. Conversely, Thorfinn was offered chance after chance to become something more, but each time his childish anger and Viking pride blinded him. But now, stripped of what has become his life's singular pursuit, Thorfinn has no choice but to truly hear the final words that escape Askeladd's mouth. They are not the curse of an enemy, but the final wishes of a friend, to venture beyond revenge, towards a land even his father could never reach. For both he and his father, time is up. But Thorfinn still has time to reckon with his sins, accept who he is, and ultimately become the warrior both Ascalad and his father always knew he was capable of. Now being dragged away per Canute's orders, Thorfinn's mind fractures. The final page of this arc carrying with it more meaning than any battle or speech ever could. His father's shortblade, the very visual that lured me and him into this adventure for the very first time, now acts as the closing curtain upon which this arc meets its conclusion. A weapon of violence finally thrown to the ground. Within this video, I followed the story of one distant ancestral cousin in the hopes of gaining a deeper insight into my conflicted feelings concerning my more recent ancestors' decisions. thinking that through seeing the world, exploring this story and the messages of its text, I would uncover some deeper philosophical outlook that could answer whether or not what my family chose to do was justified. I mean, that's what history is for, right? To reveal the patterns of human nature through the benefit of hindsight. But as Thorfinn finally dropped that dagger and the number of pages remaining in this arc fell to 0, I realized that the answer I was looking for wasn't going to arrive. Instead, what I was confronted by was a truth I had been avoiding since this story began. Thorfinn Karlsefni was born over 1,000 years ago. That's like 50 generations, which means while I am related to him through my Fitzpatrick family line, I'm also related to him via my mother's family, and in fact, on such a massive timescale, most of you watching with European ancestry are likely related to him also. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of possible descendants here. Now, discoveries such as this run the risk of taking the wind out of my sails, leaving me adrift at sea, but in truth, gaining this perspective delivered me safely to the shoreline of a promising new way of thinking. As seen through Askeladd's torture scene, historical narratives can be dangerous in the hands of those seeking to extract moral certainty. Ascalad had legitimate grievances about Celtic suffering under Anglo-Saxon violence, but where he crossed the line was in announcing with absolute certainty that his understanding of history gave him the moral authority to commit precisely what he was carrying out. He was wrong. My quest risked falling into that same trap. I was looking for an answer, vindication, but the more I searched, the more I realized how little concrete evidence actually remained. What little sources I had were separated by centuries from the actual events they described. My family's motto, "The strong will yield to the stronger," it feels like cowardice to my modern perspective, and maybe to some extent it was. But if this story has taught me anything, it's that historical pride, just like shame, isn't our burden to bear. Throughout history, terrible men have weaponized genealogy and the achievements of the past to justify the subjugation and control of millions. Wielding words that harken back to a nostalgic, better time we have had nothing to do with. And it works, because the future is scary. Because uncertainty is scary. Now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't take lessons from the past or try to learn from it or better ourselves, but as Homo sapiens, blessed and cursed with the awarenesses that we have, perhaps the lesson to take from all of this is that which countless generations before have constructed monuments, civilizations, and religions around avoiding. The fact that uncertainty is unavoidable. Thorfinn collapsed under the weight of needing certainty. The desire to seek retribution in blood for the wrongs committed is profound and easily misinterpreted as valor in the moment. But upon reflection, if you can take a beat, such ambitions are often little more than an easy way out, a comfortable answer. It's easy to paint someone as a villain, to dismiss their view and humanity entirely in the name of your selfish ambition. But to look past that impulse, to embrace uncertainty and lay down your weapons regardless of your personal feelings, in a world like this, that takes profound courage. And through this journey, that is what I've discovered defines a true warrior. Thanks everyone for watching. This project took longer than expected to come out, but I do hope it ended up being worth it in the end. I'd never seen someone travel to the locations of the anime they were reviewing before, and honestly, it sounded like too much fun to pass up. If you're coming from Patreon, then hello, thanks. You've likely seen a lot of this already, and if you're not from Patreon and would like to see early updates on what's coming next, please consider supporting us. It would mean the world. In saying that, I do promise the next video will be out much sooner. Or should I say videos? Ooh, plural, what's he mean? Well, if you want to know what I'm working on next, in addition to all the animation goodness we're working on, check out my Patreon by clicking the link on screen or in the description down below. I love you all, and make sure to tell someone today that you love them. But until next time, I've been Totally Not Mark.